At one point, she was like the poster girl for growth. And then now it's like overnight, she's like the villain. Don't forget that under the emergency, India had a far better democracy ranking though. So obviously, things must have been better then. And we're all just idiots. Bangladesh, by the way, ranked better than us. Things are going great there, I see.
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. Puru and I have a lot to get into today.
In the emergency, the Indira Gandhi government passed a ton of constitutional amendments, but they joke that that's called like the mini constitution.
During school, did you ever wonder that it was odd that they didn't tell us anything about why the Gandhis are called the Gandhis?
Kangana Ranaut in the firestorm again, man. So like an instant policy option was literally like, let's just pick up people in a van and get them sterilized.
They taught such an interesting part of our history was taught in such a boring way. Because now when you're reading about it, it's like more compelling than a Game of Thrones episode.
It is literally Game of Thrones on steroids. If you look at even our old history.
Like we would learn that this tree gives you this type of wood.
Yeah.
But past that, then it was, and the capital of this country in Africa. It was like, okay, what the do I do about that thing I learned about the wood?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what did you even study in your MBA?
How can you be pro the CAA and pro gay rights?
Yeah, like it's like baffling for them. Form of legalized bribery, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Rathi himself called it for the UP one, I guess, not the one. You can see that it's basically a copy of this bill. Please like and subscribe. If you do subscribe enough, we'll move to Uttar Pradesh so we can then start making some money.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. Puru and I have a lot to get into today.
Exciting times again. I think like each week there's just so many things that happen.
Yeah,
It's
we
like,
always wondered like, will something not happen next week? And then it's too much. So I was reminded of this thing that happened to me in college, which is, I think, a bit of a foreshadowing of why we get so divided and polarized and can't even agree on facts. So a friend of mine, we were practicing for a math final and we were solving all these equations to practice. And we couldn't get this one equation. So my friend had an idea and he said, let's ask the internet for help.
Nice.
So he goes on to Reddit and he says, hey, practicing for a midterm, need help solving this differential equations. Can you please help me with an answer? Days go by and he gets no response, right? And he's like, man, what's going on? And one day he has an idea. And he's like, you know what? Let me try something. He creates a fake profile and he goes to his own post and he comments there with the wrong answer. Saying that, hey, this is the solution to your equation. You're welcome. And he posts it. Within like 10 minutes, 20 people have started commenting on this post. No, you're a idiot. This is not the right answer. This is the right answer. Yeah. Another post, 10 posts like this, all giving the right answer. And it was just so sad. And, we were just marveling at, wow, people will really go out of their way to tell you you're wrong and you're an idiot. But they will not help you when you want the help. It takes the same amount of effort. And I thought maybe this is why we seem to be in this state where people can't agree. Maybe people are asking for answers. They're not getting them until they say something wrong. And then all the answers are coming out.
Like that's what we've become, like a gotcha culture. You want to have a gotcha where you like catch the person being wrong. It gives you like tremendous fulfillment for some reason.
And they actually studied this phenomenon. And this guy, it's called Goldstein's law now. People are far more likely to correct you if you're wrong on the internet than they are to help you with the right answer.
Crazy. Yeah. I'm not surprised that this exists.
You know what's funny though is that it's not actually called Goldstein's law, guys. But it's called Cunningham's law. But in the clip we make of this, we're going to say it's called Goldstein's law and maybe put Cunningham's law into test. Let's see what we get in the comments.
I wonder how many people are going to jump to correct it. This is great. Real-time experiments with the Overcorrection podcast.
So anyways, we'll see how that plays out. But so speaking of misinformation on the internet, which we are now consciously putting out with Goldstein's law, let's get into the UP content creator bill that is in discussion right now on the heels of the broadcast bill that we discussed a few weeks ago. Yeah. And we were talking about it and you actually told me something pretty interesting about some of the details.
I was just reading about the bill, right? So, broad strokes was that, they want to rope in social media influencers to, harness their potential to narrate rich stories of the culture, heritage of the state, essentially like amplify the narratives through these partnerships with influencers. They've, delineated 5 categories based on the number of subscribers where you can actually earn money. Like, so category A, you can earn 8 lakhs. But obviously there's like one of the caveats is that you have to ensure that, the influencers are maintaining a positive and lawful digital image with no criminal records or engagement in activities against the state or against national interests. So like anti-national behavior. But wait, this is not the UP one. This was actually the one in Punjab that was passed last year by the Aam Aadmi Party. But I think maybe Faye and that ecosystem missed this bill. This is actually not the UP bill. This is the exact wording of the Punjab bill. So you can see that it's basically a copy of this bill.
What happened? Why didn't we pick this up in 2023 when this happened?
I don't know. Yeah, where was the outrage, right? This is equally, I think the words are pretty much the same as the UP one. Equally, I guess you can argue vague and
most importantly, pre-election.
Yeah, or like another very famous influencer has said, form of legalized bribery, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Rathi himself called it, for the UP one, I guess not the Punjab one. I guess there it's different, right? There, how they define anti-national is different. So, but I mean, jokes aside, I do think a lot of the discussion and critique of the bill is valid. I don't know. I want to get your take on this. I feel like based on what you were saying about the broadcast bill, right? That showed that the government has realized that legacy media is perhaps not representative now of where people are going to get news anymore. And this is another attempt to just try and understand this world of like influencers and this ecosystem and try and bring it into the fold. But more often than not, I think the vague laws is what makes it scary for people.
Do you think it's wrong? Because I was wondering about the schemes. Now, if a government has a scheme and they just want to promote it through social media channels, like, hey, we have a welfare program on, we have a food security program on.
Yeah.
Is it like wrong to use these channels?
I don't know. See, I think the only part that I think is the vague part that is what's scaring people is that anti-national thing, which is obviously the language in both. I think that is problematic. But just paying for content, isn't that the whole industry in its essence?
Exactly.
Like, that is what they do, right? Like, oh, I'll take money from like XYZ corporation to put, this face cream that probably will damage my skin, but I'm going to tell all my followers that it's great for their skin. And I'm happy to take that money.
But should we be doing it with taxpayer money, with the government? But doesn't the government have the right to have a digital presence?
I would argue it should, and it, like we said on the broadcast bill, it should have some strong regulatory oversight as well. Again, because we're very informationally porous, and we can all be naive and be like ostriches with our head in the ground, assuming that there are people that are actually not spreading anti-national content. That is, not anti-national in the in vogue sense of just anything against the government, but genuinely things like, Kashmir is not an integral part of India, dangerous kind of content that has emboldened, say, even like Maoist groups in the hinterlands of the country. Like there is this kind of dangerous content that does circulate. So it would be erroneous to assume that this law is completely out of malice just to target and jail people. Because, there was a time when we did that. Right?
And that is also right now. Guys, on Friday, the movie Emergency is going to be released.
Yeah. Kangana Ranaut in the firestorm again, man. She just has a way of, I think, getting bad and good attention, lot of discussion on it. I think from what I was reading, the main point of contention was that the movie, when it was going through like the review and the edits through the film certification board, they found that, they had to do like standard edits, which the board does anyways. But like they found that the way they portrayed the Sikh community in many of the parts of the movie were not done in good taste, is what I've heard broadly. And interestingly, there was like bipartisan agreement on this.
Yeah.
Right? So the Shiromani Akali Dal the party in Punjab, plus the BJP, they all said, look, this is not, even because Kangana is a BJP MP,
Yeah.
right? So they said, look, this is not our stance.
Yeah.
So there was some internal tussle.
And I think that's a very healthy sign.
Yeah.
Despite all like the criticism around it, the fact that we don't have to be so quick to start putting all our views in one bucket all the time just because we stand with one party or support one party.
Correct.
We were talking about this earlier about how easy it could be to know one political opinion of someone's and be able to guess every single other political opinion of theirs.
Yeah.
Like this had been pointed out a few years ago in the American context where, if you are, say, against abortion, you are also probably going to support Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You are probably anti-vaccine.
Yeah, like by association, all these other things, right?
All these other things get slotted in there.
Yeah.
You probably think that social media and YouTube and Twitter are pushing some sort of woke agenda.
Correct.
Like you just because you have one opinion on any of these,
Yeah.
I can guess what all your other political opinions are. And here I think is a bit of a thing where seeing more internal struggle between a party and having
Yeah.
different opinions within is a healthy sign. So I think we should
think
stay
so.
away from that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can easily see that. Unfortunately, I think we're kind of there in India, right? At some level where
Yeah.
people at least will try and do it. And I think that's the problem, right? So if they heard this podcast, they might hear one clip, right? I've had people in our comments that have come and said like, oh, you guys are like classic unbucks that have done XYZ. And they assume that we have all these opinions. But if they actually asked us, say, what is our opinions from everything from, climate change to gay rights to abortion to this thing, they would find that it's actually not at all what they think.
Yeah.
Right. But then that leaves that cognitive dissonance. Like, wait, what? Like, how could these guys like also believe this?
How can you be pro the CAA
Yeah.
and pro gay rights?
Yeah, like it's like baffling for them. Or like, how can you be critical of, say, some of Israel's actions, but also, believe in, I don't know, something else, right? Like believe that the Waqf Act needs to go, right? Which is again another big thing in the news right now. And I think we should do a full episode on the Waqf Act. I think that was like shocking.
I think one time we were going to
it.
talk about it and I started reading and I was like, this needs a little more time to prep because I couldn't even understand its underpinnings.
Yeah, dude, it's shocking. Like, I know we were not even planning on talking about this, but I was just reading 2 articles this week. Like, they have basically done land grabs of epic proportions, just turning around and saying, okay, this entire land in Tamil Nadu, including like heritage temples and all, like, this is Waqf. Deal with it. Right? But now, I mean, they're trying to codify this law. I think that's why they're trying to find far more representation on the Waqf board itself, like trying to add these measures to stop like these random land grabs. Basically, this is what they were doing. But I came to this only to say that it's not black and white. Politics is not black and white, especially in India, it's not black and white. Right? Like perhaps in the US, you could even say that it's so polarized that they are likely to agree on those things.
Yeah.
But in India, it's just a different game. Right? Like,
do you think that there is something about human psychology where conservative values have certain temperaments and people with liberal values have certain temperaments? Because, for example, it has been shown that I think cross-culturally that as people age, they become more conservative.
Correct.
Now, what does this mean to you?
I find that very interesting. I feel like we would have to, which we have tried to get into many times, is like, what do we actually even mean by conservative, right?
Yeah.
In the sense, like, do you just get more traditional in certain aspects? Do you want to preserve certain traditions that you think are good or important, or you see more of an intangible benefit in staying truer to your roots when you get older? Perhaps?
I think the interesting part about tradition you mentioned is that tradition is something you can only appreciate with time, I guess.
Yeah.
So would be a natural inclination of young people
Exactly.
to scoff at tradition because
Yeah.
you're 10 years old and someone says, do this because we've done it. He's like, I've not done this.
Yeah. Have you like seen all those jokes where it's like, 20 years later or your 30s, you're like, man, how many things like your parents were right about? And like at the time you're like, you guys are wrong. And you're like, nope, you guys are right. And I think that just happens at some level. It's just, dude, in the end of the day, experience is experience. You would have just lived 20, 30 years longer and seen more changes.
But I think you can also become so much more liberal as you age. Have you noticed this amongst grown-ups? Like, after the age of 50, they start accepting so many things in life that they start just becoming okay with things.
Correct. And I would also like to think that in India specifically, a lot of people are becoming logically liberal on a lot of things. Whereas in parts of the West and in certain circles in India, I would say it's like illogically liberal on certain things. Like I said in the past, right? Having a blanket adoption of like Western liberalism on India might not always work because our landscape is very unique, right? We're not, it's very, very diverse. The people that we represent are very diverse. There are like historical injustices that you have to correct for here. So it's just not all black and white. So people might become more liberal in India on a lot of things and have already been liberal on things that would be considered like, very, very conservative in the US.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes may not even be aware that we're liberal because of some of the media polarization.
Yeah.
Like I heard a lot of people this week saying they've passed a new law allowing LGBTQ people to have joint bank accounts.
Correct. Yeah.
It's like, this is not a new law.
Yeah, this has been there for a while. Like the RBI notification on this was like in 2015, instructing the banks that they have to create special provisions for allowing joint account creation for the queer community.
Yeah.
Right. Again, like this is again a headline like straight out of something you would see only in like what people say like the woke US West, but this is just there already.
Yeah.
In fact, there was again, by the way, this RBI circular had a specific mandate that the banks in their systems have to allow for a third gender in the applications as well. Right. And then that actually enabled banks or empowered banks and NBFCs to even offer like dedicated services for transgender community. Like I know ESAF Bank had like a rainbow savings account and things like that.
Yeah.
Again, you don't see a lot of this coming to the top.
Yep. And like we said, like maybe even within this bubble, there can be people who say, look, we have to recognize the rights of the LGBTQ community when it comes to civil issues.
Yeah.
And within that, there's also, okay, but we're still not there on gay marriage yet.
Yeah. Right. That's
and there's all these
discourse.
other issues. It's this whole discourse that's going on.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think is a healthy way to at least get to your answers.
And like as a democracy, that's what you'd want, right? You'd want there to be a parliamentary discussion on this by the people that represent you, right, in the government to try and come to a consensus. No matter what I feel personally. Like I say, for example, I strongly believe it should happen. But I understand that it is a democracy. It takes time. There's different states, there's different religions in different states, right, that are dominant there that would have their own say as well, right? So it takes time to come to that consensus. But I think that's the problem also. People want, like we're so used to instant gratification in all aspects of life. I think that kind of applies to policy as well.
Yeah.
Right? It takes time. It takes a lot of time to get good policy done.
And not to say there aren't people suffering due to the time it's taking, but it is the nature of, I'd say, a healthy system.
Correct.
For it to go through those checks and balances.
Yeah.
You know, what may seem obvious to you or me is, I guess, not immediately obvious to other people.
Those checks and balances, I think, are the cornerstone of a good system, right? In the end of the day, because we actually didn't live through it, but like when we didn't have those checks and balances in that emergency period, since we did touch on the movie, like it was scary. So like an instant policy option was literally like, let's just pick up people in a van and get them sterilized as a solution. Like no real discussion on this. Let's just go do it, right? So that's quick. Like it's a quick policy action, but it's like inhumane.
And people would have been saying, it's obvious we need to do this. What is going to happen to our country if we don't do it?
Yeah. I mean, it is a scary, like just as this movie was coming out, I was just reading about some of the stories. It's like so dark. In school, when I read it, it was not written in a way that it made me realize just how bad it was.
Absolutely. It just felt like, oh, food security, post-war.
Yeah.
There was something that happened. 3 paragraphs later, we've moved on. Everything was great.
Yeah. Not like all opposition leaders arrested, like suspension of like so many constitutional things that you're supposed to have.
I was reading the Wikipedia article, just the list of the number of famous people, because everyone's name was like a hyperlinked name. And it was like 8-10 lines of just names of super prominent leaders who were arrested.
In the emergency, the Indira Gandhi government passed a ton of constitutional amendments, including adding the word secular to the preamble of the constitution, right? Because it was not there before. But they joke that that's called like the mini constitution, because she added so many amendments that it like really kind of changed the nature of the constitution to what it is today, which shows that it is an amendable document, obviously. But
you can go too far on that as well.
Scary, and that people don't realize that we had that once. But of course, Rohan, don't forget that under the emergency, India had a far better democracy ranking though. So obviously things must have been better then, and we're all just idiots.
I think that's why the government has an issue with it. Because of how well it's showing our democracy works.
Seriously, man. Those rankings, I don't know why I just can't get it out of my system. I just find it
Don't
so
worry,
funny.
they'll be back, guys.
Yeah. Bangladesh, by the way, ranked better than us. Things are going great there, I see. Like, you can't make these things up. But yeah.
But during school, did you ever wonder that it was odd that they didn't tell us anything about why the Gandhis are called the Gandhis?
Yeah. That's actually a good point.
Because it always, I was like, okay, we learned so much about Mohandas Gandhi.
Yeah.
And we learned so much about the Gandhi family.
And like Gandhian ideology.
The
movement,
the conflation of the name, but they've never really got into how they got this name. And then I started reading, and it's a conspiracy rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll find a lot of like
oh my
crazy,
God, dude.
There's a lot of theories and all that on this.
I don't even know what to say because it's kind of whack.
Yeah, because they, I guess, adopted the name. Obviously, it would have really good political mileage, and as like an homage to, because Nehru was obviously very, very close to Gandhi.
But it wasn't publicly put out as I'm adopting this name as an homage. It was just like this weird...
like we're Gandhis now.
Yeah, we're Gandhis.
Yeah.
And we're going to carry forward the legacy of this ideology in our names.
Yeah, pretty arbitrarily. And I don't even think the funniest thing is I don't believe that a lot of the things that they did were really Gandhian after that either. I don't think they embody the ideals that Gandhi had fought for so long, his whole life. You know, a lot of the things that they did thereafter, they just had the name.
But anyways, you guys go check it out for yourself, man. There's a lot of conspiracies out there around.
Yeah. A lot of WhatsApp rabbit holes as well, like on forwards or like this whole history about it. But all that aside, I do think one big realization I've had, which we've touched on, is that a way a lot of things were taught to us in school, you only realize now how like misguided a lot of it was, or like one-sided or biased, like.
And they taught such an interesting part of our history was taught in such a boring way.
Yeah.
Because now when you're reading about it, it's like more compelling than a Game of Thrones episode.
Yeah.
Like when you start reading what happened, like dating back to 1700s.
Yeah.
You know, the Nehru family, how they were formed and became what they are today. It's so compelling.
Yeah.
And if it was taught to us with a level of insight into, this is how countries form, this is how dynasties can form. Instead, we learned dynasty formation through Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When we had our own, I mean, it is literally Game of Thrones on steroids. If you look at even our old history, right? So, but, I guess there was an intent to teach education a certain way, and not all of it was bad, obviously. It was very good. But I think...
you remember what step Aurangzeb fell off?
Yeah, was it... no, not Aurangzeb. Humayun.
I know, we got a correction on that last time, and it was like an exact...
of Goldstein's law. So, yeah, I've always thought about that, on a slightly different tangent. I was talking to my family about this and like schools in India, right? What I loved about my education, say in the colleges that we went to, was I feel like they created these aha moments, right? And this is something that my family was telling me about. They had heard a recent lecture about this. Like, how can teachers create that aha moment? And I think that's what you're saying. Like, they taught what is essentially a fascinating history in such a boring way. And I think if you just do more justice to the amount of stories and the richness of culture and heritage, you can actually have kids super, super interested. Right? I think that's why, as a result, people are just detached from the whole thing.
There are so many studies done on the nature of memory.
Yeah.
That are quite fascinating. This aha moment you're talking about, when you have an aha moment about something, you'll never forget it ever again in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
There are things that click for you that resonate so strong that you know them so well, and you've never learned them in a way that you would think of memorizing them. It's a chemical level understanding of it.
Right.
And that's what that aha moment basically is. And I think it's the onus of educators out there to understand that true education is about bringing the aha moment to how many other things in life that you can bring it to.
Like, I'll never forget, Rohan, when I, obviously math, so some people like say you naturally gravitated towards math. For me, it took me some time, but I really think it's because a lot of my teachers were never really that good in building in aha moments into perhaps the most aha subject, which is math. Right?
I had a fantastic math teacher, and I heavily credit him for that.
Yeah, like, and then I did a lot of calculus in my undergrad, and it was beautiful. Like, I was smiling in calculus class, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you realize that you can actually do that for students.
Yeah, I mean, the teachers, they are paid better, and
True.
it shows in like how energetic they can be when they're teaching. The math education there was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was filled with these moments, like one day a teacher would come into class with a frisbee.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, how would you, when you play frisbee, tell me everything that goes into your head when you're trying to hit it there. How many factors do you take into account?
Wow.
And it wasn't just like in a textbook, a picture of a frisbee.
Correct. It's like here.
And we're going to go outside and throw it.
Wow.
And we're going to talk about trajectories. And a frisbee is cheap.
Yeah.
A frisbee is not some big nano computer that they have access to. It was the thought that, I can do something different today.
It's creating an aha moment. Like, we had this class in my college, which was the most subscribed to class. It was called, it was a physics class under the physics department, but it was called How Things Work. That's the name of the class. So the whole class, you just study like, here is a microwave. How does it work? Like, I'll be like, yeah, it just heats it up. But what is actually happening in that system? Right? Or what is happening in a laundry machine? Or what is happening in a car? What is an axle? What are wheels? And explaining physics through that suddenly changed the whole thing.
Yeah. So there's an approach to education where you don't study in the form of subject-based learning. You do project-based learning.
Right.
Because life does not come to you in subjects. Life comes to you in projects.
Projects, yeah.
So if you look at something like, they'll just tell a bunch of 12-year-olds, okay, figure out everything you have to do to build a basic 4-person boat raft that could float in water. The number of principles of physics you will learn, but not just physics. You will learn something about geography in terms of the type of wood that you would have to use that would make it float. That's something that was taught to us in geography class. Like, we would learn that this tree gives you this type of wood. But past that, then it was, and the capital of this country in Africa. It was like, okay, what the do I do about that thing I learned about the wood?
Yeah, exactly.
But instead, when you're learning how to make a boat, it's like, okay, this tree would give me the right type of wood to make a boat for all these separate reasons, how absorptive it is, how permeable it is to certain substances, how easy it is to carve, will it hold up under different structural loads. Then you learn about Archimedes' principle. Okay, how big does this boat have to be? How big are we? Oh shit, our density is different from that of the waters. So we're going to need this much of a hull to go under.
It's the whole thing.
I have to learn actually how to use a saw.
Right. Which is like, whatever, your design class and,
everything all put together.
Yeah. That's why I think there's a real opportunity. Like, it has been missed in a lot of schools in India. And I think it would be cool to see something like this coming.
So I learned this actually from the founder of the Acton Academy. It's a US-based global schooling academy. And they have opened a branch in Pune.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Now, I don't know how much they're making people build boats and stuff, actually. And this is not what he said. The boat is sort of an example I made from his idea of subject versus project-based education. But I'm fascinated. In fact, I would love to chat with him or the owners of the Indian school to see how they implement this change.
Yeah, it would be really, really cool. Because there's a conversation at a policy level in India. Because in the last podcast episode, when we were talking about like why people might leave and the skilling situation in India. There's actually a lot of jobs in India, but there's not enough of people with the requisite skills for those jobs, right? So we have a skilling issue, and a lot of that is because you're getting just the degree, but not the education. So, I've been looking into MBA programs and things like that, and I met a lot of students in my work that have like had MBAs. And I'm like, what did you even study in your MBA? Right? Or what did you even study in your degree? So it's literally like they're just handing these degrees out without the rigor or the exposure
Yeah.
And I think that's like I think this problem is actually going to bubble up quite a bit. Where a lot of people just think they have the degree and that's why they have the education, but that's not the case.
And it's also what types of jobs. Because, for example, I don't know if this is the case in India, but in the US, there's a big dearth of blue-collar workers.
Yeah.
That can make upwards of 100K, 200K a year.
That is a joke in the US. People are like, dude, forget all this, going and working for some private company. I'd rather just become a plumber and make way more money.
Way more money.
Like in vocations or trades.
So this guy, Mike Rowe, he's a actor turned activist in the US, and he basically has this Micro Foundation, and they are promoting blue-collar skill workers to get jobs. They're offering apprenticeships, part-time degrees so that people can fulfill their things, and they're just showing that he has a show called Dirty Jobs. Basically, no one wants to do these dirty jobs.
Right.
But man, like, they can make you money.
Yeah, in the US, the trades pay very well. India, unfortunately, not as much. But US, it's like some of those people, like if you're in just... what is it called? Like
AC repairmen.
Like AC repairmen or landscaping.
Yeah.
Like it's actually like big money if you especially like work your way up and then start your own company. You can actually make a lot of money.
Yep.
So a lot of people are saying, what is the value of paying this expensive amount and going, for these, liberal arts or whatever, even though I'm a strong believer in it, doing that and then, not being able to actually earn enough money to then live a good life. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of these are still early in India. I think in India, it's like a basic skills thing that we have a huge opportunity with our demographic benefit right now, that dividend, to use it.
It would be so sad. I was talking to a friend the other day, like if 20 years from now we sat across a table and we were like, there was that time when people said India was on the cusp of being the next great nation.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on our youth and how we perform in the workforce.
Yeah.
If we didn't make it and 20 years later we're like, I don't know, like which country would you say? Look at Pakistan or look at
all these countries. I mean, 2 years ago, or not even 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure even more recently, headlines of articles were saying how what Sheikh Hasina has done in Bangladesh is what India should have done, and why Bangladesh is on the verge of like greatness. But it just takes a little bit of instability to get where they are now, right? In fact, a lot of the liberal newspapers were like slamming the Indian government, saying that look at Bangladesh. Like, look at the growth, look at the economic growth that they've had. But then apparently that's why people are sensing some kind of conspiracy. There was an island apparently that she claimed that some white guy came and said that if you basically give us this island, then we'll help you out. And it's very conspiratorial. I don't believe there's any evidence to this. But there's been like a sudden switch in how the US regime approached Sheikh Hasina, for sure. Right? At one point, she was like the poster girl for growth amongst like the left. And then now it's like overnight, she's like the villain. So, I feel like a lot of things happen we don't realize.
Yeah, who knows what will come out next week.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think all that to say, you're right. I hope 20 years from now, we do live up to our potential.
Yeah.
And I believe we can. But I do believe you need good governance. You need trust in the government. Like the minute that trust goes, where every bill that you look at, it's viewed through like, okay, they're out to get us. A lot of these are, there is good reason to call it out. And as citizens, you should call it out. Like the broadcast bill was very poorly worded, as was the UP one, as was the Punjab one that it was based on, by the Aam Aadmi Party. But be critical, but constant cynicism, I don't think also helps when you're a growing democracy. In fact, I'll end it with a line that, again, in this book, right, Accelerating India's Development, he said this beautiful thing. India is one of the countries that got democracy before growth. A lot of the wealthy countries, they achieved all their growth when they were not actually, we like opened up massive amount of franchise before we actually had the growth levers in place, right? So we have a very unique problem. And I think to solve that will require a lot of collaborative effort.
What's the book called again?
It's called Accelerating India's Development.
I just want you to know we're not sponsored by this book. Puru just loves it.
Yeah, I just love it. It's that author's magnum opus, man.
I'll have to get a copy.
Massive. Yeah, it's very, and he's on to some next level things. I think we can do an episode.
What's his name?
Karthik Jairam, I believe. Karthik Jairam.
Yeah, you've mentioned it before.
Is, right? Yeah.
Check it once now that we're talking about it like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a book recommendation from Puru, and I get the cliff notes from him. And if you want them to, stay tuned.
So the book was Accelerating India's Development, a State-Led Roadmap for Effective Governance by Karthik Muralidharan, not Karthik Jairam.
Chalo, Goldstein's Law to the test, heavy in this episode, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes.
Yeah, please like and subscribe. And if you do subscribe enough, we'll move to Uttar Pradesh so we can then start making some money.
Yeah.